Did you understand that? About 1 year ago, I started watching a compelling TV show called Switched at Birth. It changed my life. I know, that seems absurd. While most of the plot was filled with artificial drama and love interests, some of the storyline had to do with the barrier between the hearing community and the deaf/hard of hearing community. I became fascinated and passionate about this newfound, to me, form of unfairness in the world, and spellbound by the assertive qualities that the deaf high school students in the show possessed. They had to learn American Sign Language, ASL, lip reading, and writing in English, all the while being treated differently and as if something was wrong with them. The deaf characters would often find themselves in situations where hearing people would talk about them right in front of them, assuming that they wouldn't understand. It's as if people thought that because their ears didn't work, their brain didn't either. I think that that is something crucial, something that everyone needs to think about for every community discriminated against. How someone with disabilities is not broken, but that a part of them is different from the typical. Difference has always been frowned upon, but that's a Dvar Torah for another day. No one thinks that our current society is completely just and equal. When asked, you might think of racism, discrimination against immigrants, maybe homophobia, or even gender inequality. But most of you probably don't think about the deaf and hard of hearing. I certainly didn't. After binging through an embarrassing number of Switched at Birth episodes, I was suddenly struck by the thought of learning ASL. My interest in deaf culture, which came from the show, led me to the language. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like something I would love. I was home with pneumonia in early January and feeling bored, but not bored enough to do my science homework. A Google search and a YouTube video later, I could already sign 15 words. With just 15 words, I had taken a step to listening to the deaf community. I found my new passion for the topic of listening in this week's Parsha. It is all about God's resolution to flood the earth in hopes of starting anew on the human race. I don't get it. Having only spared Noah under the Torah's justification that he was the most righteous and generous of his age, God doesn't seem righteous and generous. He seems harsh. Before destroying most of humanity, God appears to have not considered that people will be people and that moral imperfection is inevitable, even among those who strive for goodness. God found strive for goodness. God found strive. God found strive. To the immense problem, write them out of the Torah. Kill them off. Write them out. Are further reinforced by this parsha. What can further reinforce every baby? How can a one-day-old baby be corrupt? The thing that troubles me the most about this story is God. Fairly early on in the Torah, God starts out by destroying almost everything, basically all living things, and we barely have a clue why. When I say the word God, I feel like it comes with the baggage of people presuming that I believe in God. I think of God as simply a character. In this parsha, I want to see Noah as the hero, God as the villain, the ark as the setting, and the flood as the climax, all in just 4 chapters of the 5 books we call Torah. The only profoundly evil act that we are told of, from the Garden of Eden to the time of the flood, was Cain's murder of his brother, Abel. Some Midrash writers have pointed out that Cain and his misdeed could have been a contributing factor in God's decision to wipe out mankind. While it was indeed possible that Cain represented the pre-flood people and their dishonorable conduct, many commenters thought that if Cain had anything to do with the flood, his offense couldn't have been the only reason, as the flood happened 9 generations after the murder. Why would God wait so long after the sin to punish the murderer? There had to have been another motivation. Some suggested that the generation subsequent to Cain had been just as corrupt as their ancestor, Cain himself. If that was so, then, to paraphrase James Kugel in his analysis, the flood was therefore the consequence of all the wickedness that had compiled from the period of Adam and Eve to that of Noah. 10 generations. To put it bluntly, that seems unfair. Why should one last generation of people be punished for the misdeeds that people hundreds of years prior to them committed? What have they and other life forms done to deserve this catastrophic destruction? In addition to the lack of information about the people before the flood, Noah's good deeds are summed up in a simple, descriptive statement. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation, and he walked faithfully with God. Yet again, I find myself in a place to wonder why the Torah is making arguments without providing examples as evidence. I can't open my ears and listen to the Torah without stopping to question what I hear. How is Noah righteous? What makes him so righteous? Was anyone else righteous? Some interpreters argued that Noah does not appear to have done anything extraordinary prior to the flood, and still afterward his behavior seemed hardly commendable. Maybe Noah wasn't a model of perfection after all. Since information about the cultures before the flood is nowhere to be found in the Torah, except that they were corrupt, I wonder why the Torah doesn't say more. Did God not take the time to get to know them? The only mentions of pre-flood humans in the Torah refer to them as a group, as a whole, as one hideous mess. Last week's Parsha states, "And the Lord saw that wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." This statement doesn't at all speak to the specific mistakes, but instead to the fact that they are evil. While many must have done wrong, why are their stories missing from the Torah? Without understanding how they felt, God assumed they were evil. And without listening to them, God took away their lives. It is as if he heard them, but did not listen. The most central prayer in Judaism is the Shema, a prayer about listening and being an attentive listener. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. The first word, Shema, means hear. Listening is clearly a core principle in Jewish life and tradition. What else are we not listening to? Who else are we not thinking about? Near the end of the Parsha, God then states, "And I will establish my covenant with you, and never again will all flesh be cut off by the flood waters. And there will never again be a flood to destroy the earth." Once one truly listens to another person, it is difficult then to ignore them. God's regret might be related to his not noticing other righteous people.
Oh, wait a second. I'm not with you. Okay. Can you start over, please? Okay. The topic of hearing and listening brings me back to the deaf and hard of hearing community. I know of the deaf community, but I had not bothered to listen. Not only can deaf and hard of hearing people not hear, but for the most part, no one hears them. My discussion of the deaf and hard of hearing community and my signing of my Dvar is my small way of trying to give voice to people who are often ignored. I was very excited when Rabbi David told me that Romemu is working towards having some ASL interpreted services for deaf members of our Jewish community. This effort is fitting given the philosophy of inclusivity at Romemu. Prior to watching Switched at Birth, I had no understanding of the deaf, hard of hearing culture. In fact, I knew little about the deaf community at all. There is a rich, interesting culture associated with the hearing impaired, one that I wish I had been aware of long ago. Those of us who are able to hear, without even realizing it, have mostly ignored the existence of deaf and hard of hearing members in our community. In the sense that I feel the loss of many years without the signing community, the Torah lacks the stories of those humans who were stripped of their lives and not given a second chance. Think of all the learning that we have been deprived of by not getting to meet those people in the Torah who lived before the flood.
This parsha tells us loud and clear that we must give a voice to the voiceless. That's why I chose to sign my Dvar. In my family, it's been a difficult year, especially for my cousin Jacob's parents, brothers, and grandparents. In our remembering Jacob, I would like to think that we hear him and maybe even make him visible too. As I come to the conclusion of my Dvar, I invite everyone to rise, to hear this call. We must all listen to the people around us, especially those who feel not heard. Thanks.